It's the kind of thing that, in that moment, can throw off everything you thought you knew about your day, your life, and even who you are. But what if it wasn't just your backpack that was gone? What if, inside that missing bag, there was something far more mysterious, something that would change everything? A journal, written by someone who isn't you, detailing secrets you never knew existed, pulling you into a tangled web that you never saw coming. Sounds crazy, right? But this is exactly what happened to a girl just like you, someone who thought they knew their world until everything went upside down. Stick around because by the end of this video, I promise you'll have the answer to the mystery of what happened to this backpack and the journal that followed it. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of what's coming. Now, I want you to picture yourself for a moment. You're a regular high school student, maybe sitting at your desk in class or running errands after school. You've got your backpack with you, filled with all the usual stuff, books, notes, maybe a water bottle. But today, something feels off. You're distracted, perhaps preoccupied with a conversation you just had, or maybe you've just seen something in passing that made you uneasy. It's the kind of feeling you get when you know something's about to happen, but you're not sure what exactly it is. And then, it happens, you put your bag down for a second, maybe at lunch or in the locker room, or on the bus. You turn around, and when you come back, it's gone. No one's seen anything, and you're standing there in disbelief, wondering if you've lost your mind or if someone is playing a cruel prank on you. But when your backpack finally turns up again, it's not just your usual stuff that's been returned. No, something is different. Something wrong. The usual notes are still there, but nestled in between them is a journal that definitely doesn't belong to you. Its pages are worn, its ink faded in some places, but the handwriting is clear, it's from someone else entirely. Maybe it's the name on the front, someone you don't recognize, or maybe it's the way the words seem to call out to you, as if the journal knows you in ways you don't understand. So, there you are, holding this mysterious journal, staring at the words that seem to connect to something deep inside you, something you can't quite put your finger on. Your mind starts racing. Whose journal is this? Why was it in your backpack? What does it mean? Was it some mistake? Or, worse, was it left there for a reason? And the deeper you read, the more unsettling it becomes. The pages are filled with thoughts, feelings, and experiences that seem to mirror your own life in some uncanny ways, only the person writing them isn't you. This journal, this stranger's story, has become a part of your life. And now, you can't help but wonder, what was the real reason your backpack went missing? Maybe at first you think it's just a coincidence, a random mix-up, but deep down, you know it's more than that. There's something behind this, something that connects you to this unknown person in ways that you don't fully understand yet. The questions keep piling up. Why would someone put their journal in your bag? Was this a mistake, or was it intentional? Are you being targeted by someone? Or is it something far deeper than that, something that ties your fate to the story inside those pages? This isn't just about a missing backpack anymore. No, it's bigger than that. The journal isn't a random object, it's a clue. A clue to something that could change everything you thought you knew about your own life. And the more you read, the more you realize this journal might hold the answers to questions you never even knew you had. But hold up, before you start thinking that this is some sort of simple mistake, think again. What if this journal didn't just end up in your bag? What if it was meant to be there? What if the journal is the key to a secret, a story that's been hidden for years, one that's only now, somehow, intersecting with your own life? And what if you're the only person who can figure it out? Now, you're probably wondering, how is this possible? How could someone's journal end up in a random backpack like that, and why is it so eerily connected to your life? Maybe it sounds like a stretch, but stay with me, because as you dive deeper into this mystery, everything will start to come together. It's all about piecing together the fragments of a story that don't seem to make sense at first, but trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand how it all fits. In this video, you're going to follow the journey of this girl who's just like any of us, whose normal, ordinary life is turned upside down by the arrival of a mysterious journal. Along the way, you'll see her search for answers, her struggle with confusion and doubt, and ultimately, her discovery of something far more sinister than she ever could have imagined. But before we dive into that, I want you to ask yourself this: what would you do if you found something like this? Would you keep reading? Would you confront the mystery, or would you leave it alone, never wanting to know the truth? As we go through this story, think about it. What would you do? The answers won't come easy, and some of them might surprise you. What started as a simple missing backpack is going to lead you down a rabbit hole that you never saw coming. By the end of this, you'll be asking yourself, who is this journal really for? And why was it meant for you? Stick with me, because we're just getting started. I promise, you'll want to hear the full story and find out exactly how this journal and this missing backpack fit into a much larger mystery. But for now, let me leave you with this question. Is this a coincidence, or is something bigger at play here? You're about to find out, but only if you stick with me to the very end. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of what's coming next. Let's go back to the day it all started. The girl at the center of this mystery is just like any other teenager trying to navigate the chaos of high school life. Her name is Emily, and like most students, she had a lot on her plate: assignments, extracurriculars, a strained relationship with her parents, and the usual ups and downs that come with being a teenager. On the surface, everything seemed normal, too normal, almost. Emily had her group of friends, mostly a tight-knit circle of girls who shared inside jokes, lunch breaks, and an occasional secret. But lately, things had been off. She'd been feeling disconnected, like something was slipping through her fingers, and no matter how hard she tried to hold on to it, the grip was loosening. Maybe it was because her best friend, Lily, had started hanging out with a new crowd, leaving Emily feeling more like a third wheel. Maybe it was the sudden change in her school schedule, or the fact that her part-time job at the local cafe was consuming more of her time than she anticipated. Whatever it was, Emily felt like she was drifting, stuck in a life that wasn't hers anymore, but she couldn't figure out what exactly had changed. In the days leading up to the disappearance of her backpack, Emily had found herself unusually preoccupied with one thing: her future. It was the time of year when everyone was starting to talk about college applications, SAT scores, and what their life might look like once high school was over. Emily had always been a planner, someone who liked to know what was coming next, but the pressure was starting to overwhelm her. It felt like she was walking down a narrow hallway, each door representing a different choice, and every time she opened one, it led to a dead end. She had grown frustrated, anxious even, unsure of which path to take, and the constant anxiety made her question whether she was truly ready for what lay ahead. Add to that the tension at home. Her parents, well-meaning but often distant, were pressuring her to make decisions she wasn't ready to make, forcing her to be someone she didn't entirely recognize. They expected her to have it all figured out, but she didn't. She couldn't even decide what she wanted for lunch without second-guessing herself. Emily had tried to shake off these feelings by throwing herself into her schoolwork, but that only made things worse. Her grades were good, but they weren't as stellar as they used to be, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was slowly losing touch with the person she used to be. Her relationship with her friends was becoming strained, especially with Lily. There was an unspoken tension between them, an awkwardness that hadn't been there before. They used to be inseparable, but now it seemed like there was an invisible wall between them. Emily tried not to let it bother her, but it was hard not to feel the sting of abandonment when Lily spent more time with her new group. And as for her parents, their well-meaning but incessant questioning about her plans for the future only made her feel more trapped. It was during this tumultuous period of her life when everything came to a head. One Tuesday afternoon, Emily had been rushing between classes, trying to get to her English exam while carrying an armful of books, when she stopped by her locker to grab her backpack. In her distracted state, she had left it unattended for just a few minutes while she chatted with a teacher. When she returned, her bag was gone. It wasn't the first time something had gone missing at school. Emily had seen her classmates misplace things or leave them behind. But this felt different. She didn't immediately panic. Maybe she had just set it down in the wrong place, maybe someone had borrowed it by mistake, she told herself. But after searching the hallway, the classrooms, and even asking around, no one had seen her bag. That's when the first wave of dread set in. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of the day, Emily was on edge. She'd reported it to the school's lost and found, though deep down, she knew that wasn't going to help. That's when, around 6 p.m., she received a message from the school office. Her backpack had been found and was waiting for her to pick it up. She hadn't expected it to turn up so soon, and while she was relieved, there was an odd sense of unease that followed her as she drove to the school to retrieve it. It felt too simple, too easy. When Emily walked into the school office, there was no one there except the receptionist, who handed her the backpack with a distracted smile. Emily didn't think to check it at first, she was just grateful to have it back. But when she got home, her relief quickly turned to confusion. The bag wasn't the same as she remembered. At first, it was the weight. The bag felt heavier than usual, as if it contained something more than just the typical school supplies. Then, she noticed that the zipper was slightly off-center, almost as if it had been tampered with. It wasn't until she opened it and started pulling out her things that she realized something was terribly wrong. Amid her books and notebooks was a small, leather-bound journal. It wasn't hers. She'd never seen it before, and it definitely didn't belong to anyone she knew. It was like a cold chill ran down her spine as she stared at it. The cover was old and worn, with no markings, no title, just a faint, crisscrossed pattern etched into the leather. At first, Emily thought it might be some kind of joke. Maybe one of her friends had slipped it into her bag as a prank. But then she opened it. The handwriting was small, delicate, and unfamiliar. It was clear this wasn't the work of a classmate. The first few pages were filled with musings about things she couldn't quite understand, vague references to events unfolding, paths crossing, and fates intertwining. Nothing made sense. But the deeper she went, the more the words seemed to tug at something inside her, something she couldn't quite name. It was as if the writer had known her, as if they had been inside her head, watching her every move. She flipped through the pages, the discomfort growing with each one, until she found something that stopped her cold. The journal mentioned her by name Emily and referred to a place that was incredibly familiar, the local park. The park where she had spent so many afternoons walking, thinking, lost in her own thoughts. But this wasn't just any mention. The journal described the exact spot in the park where she had sat the day before, alone, thinking about her future. Now, Emily was no longer dealing with just a missing backpack. This journal, written by a stranger, had details about her life that she had never shared with anyone. It was no coincidence. The more she read, the more she realized that someone unknown had been watching her, following her movements, and leaving cryptic messages in a journal that somehow ended up in her bag. But why? What did they want with her? Who was behind this, and how did they know so much about her? As the night stretched on, Emily's mind raced with possibilities. Was it a prank? Or was there something darker at play? She tried to brush it off, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the journal's words. The more she read, the more it seemed like the journal was leading her somewhere, pushing her to uncover something hidden in plain sight. But what? And how far would she be willing to go to find out? The answers weren't coming easy, and the questions kept multiplying. The deeper she got into the mystery, the more tangled it became. The journal wasn't just an oddity anymore, it was a puzzle she couldn't ignore. And Emily knew, without a doubt, that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict. She just hoped she was ready for what she was about to uncover. But the question remained, was she really the one choosing to uncover this truth? Or had it all been carefully orchestrated, pulling her deeper into something far bigger than she ever imagined? The night after Emily discovered the journal, her mind was in a whirlwind. She stayed up far too late, flipping through the pages, trying to make sense of the strange references to her life and the cryptic messages that seemed to be connected to places and people she knew. It was as if the journal had been written for her, detailing her every move, but also hinting at something darker, something that hadn't fully revealed itself yet. But despite all the questions racing through her head, one thing became undeniable: she couldn't stop reading. But that night, when Emily got home after the unsettling coffee shop meeting with Lily, she found him sitting at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed, holding his phone with a troubled expression. She didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was just another typical teenage problem, maybe a fight with his girlfriend or some drama at school. But as she walked closer, she saw the screen of his phone and froze. Max was staring at an identical message to the ones Emily had received. "Stop looking. You have no idea what you're getting into." There was no name attached to the text, no number, just like the ones Emily had been getting. Her heart skipped a beat. Had someone figured out Max was related to her? Was this connected to the journal, to everything she had been uncovering? She took a deep breath and tried to stay calm, walking over to him slowly, trying not to let her voice tremble when she asked, "Max, what's going on? Who sent that?" Max glanced up, startled, and quickly tucked his phone into his pocket, as if trying to hide it. "It's nothing," he said too quickly, his voice a little too defensive. "It's probably just some random spam or whatever. Don't worry about it." But Emily wasn't convinced. The same message, the same warning, it couldn't just be a coincidence. It couldn't just be spam. Not with everything that had been happening. She had to know more. "Max, that's exactly the same message I've been getting," she pressed, her voice sharp now. "This isn't just some random text. It's connected to the journal, to my backpack going missing. Why didn't you tell me about this?" Max was quiet for a moment, clearly unsure how to respond. Finally, he let out a sigh, rubbing his face with his hands. "Look, Emily, I didn't want to freak you out," he muttered, his voice low. "I don't know who sent it. I just got it today. I thought it was probably nothing, just some weird coincidence. I didn't think it had anything to do with you." But Emily wasn't buying it. There was something off about Max's reaction, something in his eyes that told her he was hiding more than he was letting on. Was it possible that Max had been involved in something that connected back to her, something darker than she could have imagined? Before she could press him further, Max stood up abruptly. "I'm going out," he said quickly, avoiding her gaze as he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Emily opened her mouth to ask him where he was going, but the words caught in her throat. She had the feeling that Max wasn't telling her the whole truth, and as much as she hated to admit it, she could tell that whatever was going on, Max was more involved than he was letting on. She watched him leave, a wave of unease washing over her. Was Max in danger too? Or was he hiding something far worse? The mystery was becoming even murkier, and Emily knew that she needed to find out what was going on before it swallowed everyone she cared about. But Max wasn't the only one who seemed to be in danger. The more Emily dug into the mystery, the more she started to uncover things she hadn't expected. She managed to get a hold of some old records, some of the forgotten school documents from years before, things that might have helped explain the bizarre connection between her and the journal. She'd spent hours combing through public records and talking to old teachers, but everything kept leading to dead ends. That is, until she found a name that stood out. The name was small, almost insignificant, buried in the back of a yearbook from 3 years ago. A girl named Vanessa Hartwell. Emily had never heard the name before, but there was something about it that made her stop and take notice. Vanessa wasn't a student who had been at the school for long. She transferred in during Emily's sophomore year but left suddenly without warning. The records were vague, but Emily found a photograph of her in the yearbook. The face was so familiar, yet so distant, as if she had seen it somewhere before. Digging deeper, Emily found that Vanessa had been known for keeping to herself, an outsider who didn't really interact with anyone. But she'd also been incredibly secretive, and rumors had swirled about her even back then. Some people whispered she was involved in strange activities, things that didn't seem to fit the image of the shy, quiet girl she appeared to be. Emily's heart raced as she wondered if Vanessa had something to do with the journal, with the missing backpack. Maybe this was the person who had left the journal for her to find, maybe she had even been involved with whatever strange force was pulling her into this mess. But the more Emily dug into Vanessa's past, the less it made sense. There were no clear answers, no direct connections, just more dead ends and strange coincidences. Then, just when Emily thought she was getting closer to uncovering the truth, something else happened, something that turned everything she thought she knew upside down. One afternoon, while she was walking home from school, Emily was stopped by a man she didn't recognize. He was older, perhaps in his late 30s, with dark eyes that seemed to peer right through her. He approached her in a way that felt both too casual and too urgent at the same time. "You need to stop," he said in a low, almost menacing tone. "You're getting too close to something you don't understand. It's not just your life on the line anymore. People will get hurt if you keep going down this path." Emily's stomach twisted in knots. "Who are you?" she demanded, her heart pounding in her chest. The man hesitated for a moment, then muttered something under his breath, almost as if he was debating whether or not to say more. Finally, he looked at her with something that might have been pity, but also something far darker. Some things are better left buried. Trust me, you don't want to know what you're dealing with. And just like that, before Emily could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The words hung in the air like a warning, but what did they mean? Who was this man? Why did he know about the journal, and why was he so desperate to make her stop? Was this a random encounter, or was this someone tied to the mystery, someone who knew things that could tear everything apart? Emily's head spun as she replayed the conversation over and over again, trying to make sense of it. She thought she was getting closer to the truth, but now, with the threat of danger looming, she wasn't so sure anymore. One thing was clear: someone was going to great lengths to keep her from finding out the truth. And Emily had no idea who to trust. With Max acting strange, Lily pulling away, and a strange man warning her to stop, Emily found herself standing on the edge of something far deeper and darker than she could have ever imagined. The deeper she dug, the more secrets seemed to rise to the surface, and with every piece of the puzzle she uncovered, it felt like the stakes were getting higher. But one thing was for sure: she couldn't turn back now. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching her. It wasn't just the lingering paranoia that had been building in her over the past few days, it was something far more real, something that settled deep in her bones. It started small, the feeling that she was being followed. At first, she'd brush it off. After all, it wasn't unusual to feel like you're being watched when you're in the middle of a mystery. But it didn't stop. Every time she turned a corner, there was a shadow that seemed to fall just behind her. Every time she glanced over her shoulder, she caught a fleeting glimpse of someone in the crowd, their face hidden, but their gaze unmistakably fixed on her. It was like being in the middle of a fog, and no matter how hard she tried to reach out for the truth, it was slipping further and further from her grasp. She thought about the man she had encountered on the street, the one who had warned her to stop. His words echoed in her mind: "You don't want to know what you're dealing with." What had he meant by that? What could be so dangerous, so terrifying, that even strangers were being pulled into her life like this? It was as if something dark had opened up beneath her feet, and she was helplessly sinking into it. One evening, Emily stayed later than usual at the library, trying to finish up a project for school and hoping that being busy with something normal might distract her from the growing sense of dread that had taken over her life. She had almost finished packing her things when she heard it, a sudden, sharp tapping on the window. It was just a few feet from where she sat, and the noise made her jump out of her skin. Her heart hammered in her chest as she turned toward the window, half expecting it to be one of her friends pulling a prank. But when she looked outside, there was no one. Just the empty street, bathed in the dim light of the street lamps. She sat there for a moment, frozen, wondering if it had all been in her head, if the stress had finally started to get to her. But then she heard it again. Another tap. This time, closer. Her breath caught in her throat as she stood up and walked to the window, hands trembling. She peered outside, her eyes scanning the street, her mind screaming for her to run, but she couldn't tear her gaze away. The street seemed empty, but there was something off about the shadows, something that made her stomach twist in knots. Then, as if on cue, she saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the parking lot across the street, just outside the reach of the streetlights. She couldn't make out any details, just the vague shape of a person standing still, watching her. Emily's heart pounded violently in her chest. She didn't need to see their face to know that they were watching her. And in that moment, everything she had been trying to ignore, the warnings, the disappearing journal, the cryptic messages, crashed into her like a tidal wave. This was real. She wasn't just imagining things. Someone was after her. She quickly gathered her things, trying to stay calm, but her hands were shaking too badly to put the books into her bag properly. When she turned to leave, the door slammed open with a force that made her flinch. Her first thought was that it was just the wind, but when she saw a figure standing in the doorway, her blood ran cold. It was a man tall, with a hood pulled low over his face, casting his features in shadow. Emily froze, her feet glued to the floor. She wanted to run, but something inside told her it was already too late. "Emily," the man's voice was low, raspy, like he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The sound of her name made her heart skip a beat. She didn't recognize the voice, but the way he said it, like he knew her, like he had been watching her for far longer than she had realized, sent a chill through her body. You've been looking in places you shouldn't. And now, it's too late to turn back. Before she could react, the man took a step forward, and Emily did what any instinct told her to do. She ran. She bolted past him, pushing through the door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear his footsteps behind her, but she didn't dare look back. The library was part of a larger building, and she headed for the nearest exit, her eyes scanning for any sign of help, but the place was empty, eerily silent. She pushed the door open and found herself on a narrow alley, the streetlight above flickering sporadically. Every sound around her seemed amplified, the echo of her own footsteps pounding in her ears as she ran. She didn't stop to catch her breath until she reached her car, and even then, she didn't feel safe. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped them. She finally managed to unlock the door, sliding into the driver's seat and locking it behind her. But just as she was about to start the engine, a text buzzed on her phone. It was from an unknown number, and when she opened it, her blood ran cold. You can't run forever. We know where you are. You'll never be safe. The message was short, but its weight hung heavily in the air, like a dark cloud that threatened to suffocate her. Her hands were still trembling as she looked around, half expecting to see the man from the library standing in the shadows. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly. She felt trapped, cornered in a way she never had before. The walls around her were closing in, and she realized just how dangerous this had become. The journal, the warnings, the strange people involved, it was all connected, and whatever was coming next, she wasn't prepared for it. Her mind raced, trying to process the gravity of the situation. Who were these people? Why had they been targeting her? It felt like she was being dragged into something much bigger than herself, something with consequences she couldn't even begin to understand. She started the car, her eyes darting to every passing shadow, expecting someone to jump out at her, but she didn't wait to see if anyone was there. The road ahead was empty, and yet, every mile she drove felt like she was running from something she couldn't escape. As Emily drove, a growing sense of isolation began to settle over her, the weight of the mystery pressing down on her chest. It was as if she was losing herself in the chaos, fighting a battle with no clear enemy, surrounded by shadows and lies. She had started this whole journey trying to uncover the truth, but now she wasn't sure what was real anymore. The people she thought she could trust, like Lily and Max, were becoming just as elusive as the threats she was facing. What had started as a small, personal mystery had turned into something far darker, and Emily was no longer sure who she could trust. By the time she reached home, her entire world felt shattered, like she was standing on the edge of something terrible, just waiting to fall into it. She parked her car quickly, her hands still trembling, her mind racing. There was no escaping it now. Whatever was happening was far worse than she had ever imagined, and Emily had to face the truth. She was in danger, and it was only a matter of time before the people behind this started closing in on her. As she sat in the car, staring out into the dark, she realized one thing that terrified her more than anything else. No matter how hard she tried, there was no way to run from the truth anymore. The next day, Emily barely slept. The events of the night replayed in her mind like a broken record, every tap on the window, every warning from the man at the library, the ominous text message. Her body was drained, her nerves on edge, and yet, in the back of her mind, something felt wrong. The whole situation felt too orchestrated, too neatly wrapped in a package of mystery and dread. She kept coming back to the one thing that had been gnawing at her, Maximum. She knew, deep down, that her brother was hiding something, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized she had missed something crucial. Max had been acting strange for days, almost like he knew something was coming, like he was already part of something much darker than she could have imagined. That afternoon, when Max came home from school, Emily couldn't take it anymore. She had to confront him. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal when she felt like the walls were closing in, and the truth was slipping through her fingers. Max had been her anchor for so long, and now, every time she looked at him, she saw something else, something secret, something that didn't belong. As he walked into the living room, Emily barely held herself together. "Max," she said, her voice cold and steady. "We need to talk." Max froze in place, his eyes narrowing as he stepped back, almost as if he was bracing for a confrontation. He had always been protective of her, but this time, there was something different in his gaze. Something distant. About what? He asked, his tone casual, almost too casual for the gravity of the situation. About everything, she replied, her heart racing. The messages, the journal, the guy who's been following me. I know you know something, Maximum, don't lie to me. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened, and for a moment, he just stood there, silent, like he was debating how to respond. You don't know what you're talking about, Max finally said, his voice low, a slight edge creeping into his words. It's not like you think. But that didn't make sense. She had been digging into this mystery for days, and everything was pointing back to him. Every clue, every strange reaction, every time he looked at her like he was on the verge of saying something but held back, it was all starting to piece together into something she didn't want to believe. You've been acting weird ever since I started looking into this, she said, her voice shaking with a mix of frustration and fear. What's going on, Max? You're not telling me everything. Max's eyes flickered for a moment, and then, with a sigh, he sank onto the couch, his face pale. I didn't want to get you involved, Emily. You have no idea what you're dealing with. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he looked up at her, his face filled with guilt. The reason I've been acting strange, it's because of the journal. Her breath caught in her throat. She had thought she was getting close to the truth, but now it was slipping through her fingers. What do you mean? She whispered, the weight of his words sinking in. What does the journal have to do with you? Max hesitated, then looked up at her, his face twisted in a mix of shame and fear. It's not just some random thing, Emily. That journal, it's been in our family for years. Our grandfather had it. And his father before him. It's not just a journal. It's a record of something much bigger. Something that's been passed down, hidden away, for generations. Emily's mind raced. What was he talking about? What do you mean, a record? A record of what? Max ran his hands through his hair, frustration building. It's a record of the things we don't talk about. The things we're supposed to forget. There are people who want that journal, Emily. People who will do anything to get their hands on it. I didn't want you to get involved, but now you're already in too deep. Emily's heart hammered in her chest. She had no idea what he was talking about. The journal, something passed down in their family. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to shift, but the picture was still blurry. What did this have to do with her? Why was she being dragged into this? You're telling me, it's not just some random coincidence. That people are after the journal because of our family. Emily's voice cracked with disbelief. Max nodded grimly. Yes. But it's not just the journal they want. It's what's inside it. Something dangerous. Something that can't get out. He looked down, his hands trembling slightly. And now that you've found it, it's too late. You've opened something, and they're going to come for you, Emily. They'll come for all of us. The room felt like it was closing in around her. Every word Max spoke made her head spin. She had always trusted him, and now everything she thought she knew was in question. Was he part of this too? Had he been keeping secrets from her all this time? The guilt, the fear, the desperation in his eyes, it all pointed to something far darker than she was prepared for. And then it hit her. The man I met at the library, she whispered. He knew my name. He knew I had the journal. He was looking for it too, wasn't he? Max looked up, his face pale. He's one of them. One of the people who's been trying to get the journal back for years. They'll stop at nothing to get it. And they won't stop with you. Emily's blood ran cold. All of this, the mysterious texts, the strange encounters, the warnings, had been leading her straight into the heart of something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. But then, as Max looked at her, his face hardening with determination, he said something that left her breathless. I tried to protect you, Emily, he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. But you have to understand, this is bigger than us. This is bigger than you or me or anyone. They'll come for you, and you won't even see them coming. And that's when she realized, with a sickening clarity, that the person she trusted most, her own brother, might have been part of the plan all along. But the real shock came just moments later. As Emily stood there, trying to piece everything together, the phone in her pocket buzzed again. She pulled it out, her hands numb with fear, and opened the message. The text wasn't from an unknown number this time. It was from Max. "I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Don't trust anyone." The world around her seemed to shatter in an instant. She stared at the screen, her mind reeling. Max had known all along, and yet, he had let her walk straight into the trap. The pieces finally clicked into place. Max wasn't trying to protect her, he was keeping her in the dark, leading her straight to the heart of the storm. The journal, the messages, the threats, it was all part of a much bigger game. And she was nothing more than a pawn. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. Now, she had to figure out how to survive the truth. The weight of what Emily had just uncovered felt like a heavy fog, suffocating her as she tried to process the truth. The moment the text from Max had arrived, everything she believed about the situation had shattered. Her brother, the one person she thought she could trust, had been hiding something from her, something so deep, so dangerous, that he was willing to let her walk straight into the jaws of it. The realization gnawed at her. Was she just a pawn in some twisted game? Did Max even care about her, or was she merely a means to an end? The more she thought about it, the more she began to wonder if anyone in her life had ever been honest with her. Could she trust anyone? Could she even trust herself? It had all started out so simply, a missing backpack, a journal, cryptic messages that led her down a rabbit hole of uncertainty. But now, she was in too deep, entangled in something she couldn't escape from, even if she wanted to. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that every answer only created more questions. The people who had been warning her, the strangers watching her every move, it wasn't a random series of events. It was a setup. And somewhere, hidden behind the veil of this mystery, was the truth. But now she had to decide whether it was even worth finding. That night, Emily sat alone in her room, the soft glow of her desk lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Her phone sat in front of her, the screen dimly lit by the dozens of unread messages she hadn't dared to open. She couldn't focus on anything else. Her mind kept drifting back to that final, chilling text from Maximum. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the sudden finality of it. "Don't trust anyone," he had said. And the weight of those words felt like a silent admission of guilt. He was warning her, but why? Was he trying to protect her, or was he pushing her into a corner so tight that she had no choice but to fall into the trap? Her phone buzzed again, and this time, her heart skipped a beat as she saw the name on the screen. It was Maximum. She had already ignored his calls all day, but this time, something was different. This time, she felt the gravity of the moment. She couldn't avoid him forever. If he was truly involved in all of this, she needed to confront him. She needed to know the truth, even if it meant unraveling the last thread of her trust in him. She pressed the answer button, and the sound of his breath on the other end made her stomach tighten. "Emily," Max's voice was strained, like he was fighting to keep his composure. "I know you're upset, but you have to understand. This is bigger than both of us." Emily could feel the anger rising inside her, the years of sibling trust crashing down into a storm of confusion and betrayal. "Bigger than us? What does that even mean, Max? You've been lying to me this whole time. You knew what was happening, and you let me walk into it anyway." Her voice cracked as the weight of everything hit her all at once. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly. The betrayal stung deeper than she could have imagined. "How could you let me get involved in this?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, the silence so thick it almost suffocated her. Max exhaled sharply. "I didn't want this for you, Emily. I didn't want you to be dragged into it, but you were already in too deep. I thought if I kept you away from it, maybe you'd stay safe. But they found you anyway." His voice faltered. "You don't understand what's coming. And if you keep digging, if you keep asking questions, you're going to get hurt." Hurt. The word echoed in her mind, and she recoiled, as if the very idea of it was too much to bear. But the truth felt even worse. Max wasn't just keeping her in the dark to protect her, he was trying to control her, trying to pull her away from something that she had to see through. But why? Was there something she didn't understand? Some deeper layer to this puzzle that only he knew? A sudden, chilling thought crossed her mind. What if Max was a part of this? What if he had always been part of the plan, and the whole time he was pretending to protect her, he was simply trying to keep her from uncovering the truth. What if the danger he spoke of was a lie, meant to keep her from discovering what he was really hiding? Her heart pounded in her chest. "What do you want me to do, Max?" she asked, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and desperation. "What do you expect me to do now that I know the truth?" "I'm giving you a choice, Emily," Max replied, his voice low. "You can walk away. You can forget everything, let it go, and stay safe. Or you can keep pushing. But if you do, I can't protect you anymore. No one can." The ultimatum hit her like a slap to the face. Walk away, forget everything, and stay safe. Or keep pushing, and risk everything. Her heart raced as she considered her options. Walking away seemed like the smart choice. The rational choice. After all, if Max was right, the stakes were too high. People were already after her, and the deeper she went, the more dangerous it became. She could forget the journal, let it all fade away, and try to return to her normal life. But could she really do that? Could she really turn her back on the truth, on everything she had worked so hard to uncover? Could she live with the fact that she had turned away from something so important? "No," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I can't do that." Max's voice faltered. "You're making a mistake, Emily. You're going to regret this." But it was too late. The decision had already been made. Emily felt a surge of determination as she hung up the phone, the weight of her choice settling in like a heavy stone in her chest. She had chosen the truth. But now, as she sat in the quiet of her room, she felt more alone than ever. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the silence became deafening. There was no turning back now. She had chosen to keep digging, to uncover whatever it was her brother and everyone else was trying so hard to keep buried. But the question remained, was she truly prepared for what she was about to uncover? Was the truth worth the cost? As the minutes stretched on, Emily felt the creeping sense of dread return. There were no guarantees in this world anymore. She had just made herself a target, and now, there was no escaping it. The people who had been watching her, the ones Max had warned her about, they weren't going to stop. They were going to come after her with everything they had. And she had just walked straight into the storm. The hardest part wasn't the danger, though. It wasn't the threats or the looming shadow of the unknown. It was the growing realization that, in order to survive, she might have to make even more impossible choices along the way. Choices that could cost her everything. And as Emily sat there, staring at the dim light of her phone screen, she couldn't help but wonder, was the truth worth the price? Or would it destroy everything she held dear? The answers would come soon enough. As the days passed, Emily felt herself spiraling deeper into a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. The world around her had become a haze. Familiar faces, once comforting, now appeared cold and distant, like actors in a play she no longer understood. Each phone call, each text, each passing encounter with someone she thought she knew only served to throw her further off balance. The journal had opened a door she couldn't close, and the more she learned, the more she realized how vast and complicated the web she was tangled in truly was. It wasn't just her anymore. It wasn't just Max, or the cryptic figures she'd met along the way. Emily was no longer just a passive player in this twisted game, she was at the center of it, whether she liked it or not. The conspiracy was bigger than she could have ever imagined, stretching its fingers into every corner of her life, twisting relationships and manipulating people she had known her entire life. There were forces at play here far beyond her comprehension, and they weren't just coming for the journal, they were coming for her. The moment it all became undeniable was the phone call from Lily. Lily had been Emily's closest friend for years, someone she trusted, someone she confided in about everything. But as the line rang, the deep, uneasy feeling in Emily's stomach only grew heavier. When Lily finally answered, her voice was unsteady, laced with fear. "Emily," she whispered urgently, as if she feared someone might overhear, "I need to talk to you. In person. Tonight. It's about everything. Please, you have to come." Without questioning it, Emily agreed, her heart hammering in her chest as she quickly made plans to meet her. But as she hung up, the dread began to creep in, her mind racing with every possible scenario. She had no idea what Lily wanted to tell her, but with everything else that had been unfolding, She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The question gnawed at her: was Lily just another piece in the puzzle, or was she playing her own part in something far darker? The evening air was cold as Emily walked to their usual meeting spot, a quiet park bench by the river where they'd spent countless hours talking. The city's noise felt distant, muted by the overwhelming silence that hung in the air. She arrived early, her mind racing with doubt. She had trusted Lily more than anyone else. But now, after everything that had happened, she wasn't sure who she could trust anymore. When Lily finally arrived, she looked different, pale, anxious, like someone who had been carrying a burden for far too long. "I didn't want to get you involved, Emily," she said before Emily could say a word, her voice cracking. "But you have to understand. They're coming for you. They've been watching you. I've been helping them." Emily froze, the words hitting her like a punch to the gut. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "What do you mean you've been helping them?" Lily stepped back, glancing over her shoulder as if she feared being overheard. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's too late. They're already onto you, and there's nothing you can do. I made a deal with them. They know everything, Emily. They knew you were going to find the journal. They knew you were going to dig deeper. And they let you. All of this, it was part of the plan." The world seemed to tilt around Emily. Her mind was a storm of disbelief, confusion, and betrayal. "You knew," she whispered, her heart racing. "You knew, and you let me go through all of this. All the lies, all the danger. Was that just part of the plan too?" Lily's eyes welled with tears, and she looked down, her voice breaking. "I didn't have a choice, Emily. They promised me something. If I helped them, if I kept you distracted, they said they would help me, protect me. I didn't know it would go this far. But they've been using you. This whole time." Emily's chest tightened as the truth hit her with full force. Lily wasn't the friend she thought she was. She was just another player in a game far beyond either of them. "You were never on my side." "No, I was, Emily," Lily insisted, her voice desperate. "I tried to protect you. I tried to warn you," but she stopped, choking on her words. "I didn't think it would all fall apart like this. I didn't think they'd come for you." The coldness of Lily's betrayal settled into Emily's bones like ice. She had been manipulated, played like a puppet. All of this, the threats, the mystery, the fear, it had been orchestrated from the very beginning. But why? Why drag her into this mess? What was the true purpose behind it all? And now that she knew, could she trust anyone to help her? Just then, a car screeched to a halt at the end of the park, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a blade. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she spun around, her pulse racing. There was no mistaking the black SUV that pulled up, its engine roaring. She knew, without a doubt, that they were here, the people who had been hunting her, the ones Max had warned her about. "Emily, you have to go," Lily urged, grabbing her arm. "They're here. They know you know too much. You have to leave now." But it was too late. The door to the SUV opened, and two figures stepped out, figures Emily had seen before. The man from the library, the one who had warned her about the journal, and a woman whose cold, calculating gaze sent a chill down Emily's spine. The woman smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives just before they close in for the kill. "You should have listened to your brother, Emily," the woman said, her voice dripping with venom. "But now, you're in too deep. You've seen too much. And now you're going to have to pay the price." As they began to approach, Emily's mind raced, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. There was no escape. No way out. She had been cornered, betrayed by the one person she thought she could trust, and now the people behind it all were here, ready to silence her for good. Every choice she had made had led her to this moment, and there was no way back. But then, just as everything seemed to be spiraling out of control, Emily heard a voice behind her, a familiar voice, one she hadn't expected to hear. "Not so fast. Max." Her brother stepped out from the shadows, his face pale but determined. He was holding something small, metallic, and dangerous. And in that moment, Emily understood, Max wasn't trying to protect her from the truth. He had been keeping secrets from her for a reason. He had been playing a dangerous game of his own, and now it was clear he was as much a part of this conspiracy as anyone. Everything had changed. The stakes had risen. And Emily realized with a sinking heart that the only way out was to confront the people she had trusted the most and face the consequences of her own choices. She was in this now, and there was no turning back. The tension in the air was so thick that Emily could almost taste it, a bitter, metallic tang clinging to her throat as she stood there, facing Maximum. The world felt like it was collapsing around her, everything she had ever known crumbling into dust. Her heart pounded in her chest, the reality of what was happening closing in, suffocating her. She had thought she understood the game, but now, in this moment, it was clear that nothing had been what it seemed. Max wasn't just the protective older brother. He wasn't just trying to help her. He had been part of this from the very beginning. His actions, his words, everything had been calculated. He had let her dig deeper, led her straight into this moment, and now, as she stared into his eyes, she saw the truth. Max wasn't her ally. He was a pawn, just like everyone else, caught in a web of lies and power that had already ensnared them all. "You never wanted me to know, did you?" Emily's voice broke, the words bitter in her mouth. She felt her stomach twist with disgust as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. "This whole time, you've been lying to me. Using me. You knew what was going to happen, and you let me get pulled in. You used me to keep digging, to get to the truth. And now, you're here to make sure I don't find it. To make sure I don't expose everything." Max's face flickered with something like guilt, but it was quickly replaced with cold resolve. "Emily, you don't understand. It's bigger than you. Bigger than both of us. I didn't want to hurt you, but this was the only way to protect you. I've been trying to keep you safe, even if it meant keeping you in the dark. You don't know what they'll do if you keep pushing." He paused, his eyes hardening. "And you don't want to find out." Emily's breath caught in her chest. She had trusted him. He had been her protector, her rock in all this chaos. But now, in the harsh light of truth, she saw him for what he was, another player in a game far beyond her understanding, another cog in a machine that didn't care who it crushed along the way. She had been a pawn, and now, Max's betrayal had sealed her fate. But she wasn't going to back down. She couldn't. She had already come too far, dug too deep, to let fear paralyze her now. "I don't need your protection anymore, Max," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "I need the truth. And I'm going to find it. No matter what it costs." But before she could take another step, a sharp, mocking voice echoed from behind her. "Is that so?" The woman who had been part of this twisted game all along, Evelyn, stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with dark amusement. The woman's presence had always unsettled Emily, but now, it was almost suffocating. She looked at Max, then back at Emily, her lips curling into a smile that sent a chill down Emily's spine. "You've been digging for so long, haven't you, Emily? Too bad you couldn't see the bigger picture. Max wasn't the only one playing you." Max flinched, but it was too late. Evelyn was holding all the cards now. Emily's heart sank as Evelyn pulled something from her jacket, a small flash drive, gleaming in the dim light. "This," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "is the key to everything. It's all there. The whole plan. All of it." Emily took a step forward, her hands trembling. "What do you mean? What's on it?" Evelyn's smile only widened. "Everything you've been looking for. The names, the money trails, the connections. The conspiracy you've been stumbling around in the dark trying to uncover. It's all laid out on this little drive." She tilted her head. "But you were never meant to find it, Emily. Not now. Not like this." The cold realization hit her like a slap. The journal, the missing backpack, the cryptic messages, it was all part of a bigger plan. A plan that had used her every step of the way, fed her just enough information to keep her searching, but never enough to uncover the full picture. The journal wasn't just a clue, it was a trap. They had been controlling the narrative the entire time. And now, with Evelyn standing there, holding the truth in the palm of her hand, Emily knew that everything she had believed was a lie. Max shifted uncomfortably behind her, and Emily shot him a look, her eyes burning with betrayal. "You knew, didn't you?" she hissed, her voice trembling. "You knew about this all along. I didn't want this for you, Max said again, his voice strained. But you didn't leave me a choice. Emily's head spun. She had trusted him. He was her family. But everything was coming apart now, and she could see it clearly. The conspiracy wasn't just about the journal. It was about control, about keeping power in the hands of a select few who had been using people like pawns, manipulating events from the shadows. Max had been one of them, a willing participant, and now, in this moment, she could see just how far they were all willing to go to cover up the truth. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She stepped closer to Emily, the flash drive gleaming in her hand like a weapon. You see, Emily, there's something you don't understand, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. This isn't just about keeping you quiet. It's about ensuring you never get the chance to expose us. Because if you do, everything we've worked for, all the power we've accumulated, all the control we've fought for, it will be destroyed. And we can't let that happen. Not now. Not ever. Her eyes flicked to Max, who had gone completely still. That's why Max had to do it. He had to keep you close, keep you from asking too many questions. You were getting too close to the truth. And now, well, you're going to have to make a decision. Emily's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the choice was suffocating. She could back down, accept their version of the truth, and walk away with her life intact, at least for the moment. Or she could fight. She could expose them all and risk everything, knowing full well that she would never be safe again. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, and the truth felt more dangerous than ever. You're making a mistake, Max said softly, his voice almost pleading. Please, Emily. Walk away. But Emily's eyes burned with determination as she stood there, facing the woman who had orchestrated it all, and the brother who had betrayed her. The decision wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about taking control of her own life. No, she said, her voice fierce. I'm not walking away. And in that moment, everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Before anyone could react, Emily lunged forward, grabbing the flash drive from Evelyn's hand. She didn't know what she was going to do with it, only that she couldn't let them have it. A struggle erupted, chaotic and frantic, the sound of bodies crashing against the ground and the tension snapping like a live wire. Emily's heart raced, every instinct screaming at her to fight back, to survive. And just as it seemed like she was going to lose control, something unexpected happened, a loud, deafening crash from across the park, followed by shouts, sirens, and the unmistakable sound of tires screeching as someone else entirely intervened. In that instant, the world shifted. Evelyn and Max froze. Emily's grip tightened on the flash drive as she realized, with dawning horror, that this wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Whoever had just arrived was no friend of hers. And the truth, whatever was on that drive, was more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The game was far from over. The final piece of the puzzle had just fallen into place, and the stakes were higher than ever before. Emily had just uncovered the beginning of something even darker. The fight for the truth had only just begun. The night had stretched on forever, the events unfolding like a blur in Emily's mind. She had spent hours running, hiding, and battling with herself to make sense of everything she had uncovered. The drive she had fought so desperately to protect had vanished, disappeared into the hands of forces much larger than anything she could have comprehended. But as the sirens from the police vehicles faded into the distance, and the weight of exhaustion settled on her shoulders, she found herself standing in the same park where it all had started. Everything had changed in the blink of an eye, and yet, here she was, standing in the aftermath of a storm that had torn apart her life, her family, and everything she thought she knew. Max was gone, disappeared into the shadows, like so many others who had been swallowed by this web of lies and deceit. Evelyn, too, had vanished, her plans disrupted, her grip on everything she thought she controlled slipping away. The police had come, as if some unseen hand had orchestrated their arrival just in time to stop the chaos from spiraling out of control. But even as Emily stood there, alone, in the eerie calm that followed, a sense of finality settled over her. She had done it. She had uncovered the truth, fought the battle, and come out the other side. But was it really over? Or had it only just begun? She didn't have all the answers, no one did, but she had learned enough to understand that the world was far more complicated than she ever could have imagined. The journal, the backpack, the cryptic messages, they had all been pieces of a puzzle she had only just begun to solve. And yet, no matter how many answers she uncovered, there was always more lurking in the shadows, just out of reach. The truth was never as simple as it seemed. Sometimes, it was a weapon, a burden, or even a trap, and sometimes, it could be more dangerous than the lies it was meant to uncover. But standing there, beneath the moonlight, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes with having all the answers. No, it was a deeper, quieter peace. The kind that comes from accepting the unknown, from knowing that, for all the chaos and fear, she had done everything she could. She had fought for herself, for the truth, and for the people who had been lost along the way. There was no going back to the life she had once known, but that was okay. She had learned how to survive the darkness, how to trust her instincts even when the world tried to bend them. She had learned that the greatest enemy wasn't the conspirators who had tried to manipulate her, but the doubt and fear that had threatened to consume her from within. As Emily took a deep breath, the weight of the journey slowly began to lift. She had been through hell, and yet she had come out on the other side stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever. The final piece of the puzzle may have slipped through her fingers, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had fought back. What mattered was that she had refused to let the truth be buried. She had uncovered a story that no one wanted told, and in doing so, had rewritten her own. But as Emily turned to leave the park, her mind still reeling from everything she had uncovered, a familiar voice cut through the stillness of the night. "You didn't think it was really over, did you?" It was Max's voice, low, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. Emily froze. She had thought him gone, lost forever, but here he was, stepping out from the shadows once again. His face was tired, worn, but the same dangerous glint in his eyes remained. He wasn't alone, either. Behind him, a silhouette stepped forward, someone she hadn't expected to see again. It was Lily. "Max." Emily's voice trembled, but her fear was tempered by something stronger now, a quiet determination. "What are you doing here? What's going on?" Max's eyes softened for just a moment, but the expression quickly hardened. "I'm not your enemy, Emily," he said quietly. "But the truth, it's never as simple as you think. You've only seen a small part of the picture." Lily stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You were right about one thing, Emily," she said, her voice distant, almost hollow. "You've uncovered part of the truth. But the rest of it, that's still out there. And no matter what we do, we can't change what's already been set in motion." Emily felt a chill run down her spine as she stared at them, her heart pounding in her chest. "What are you talking about? What does this mean? What's the rest of the truth?" Max gave a long, heavy sigh, his eyes flicking to Lily before returning to Emily. "It means that the game isn't over. Not for you. Not for any of us. The people who pulled the strings, whoever they are, they won't stop. They'll always be watching. You can't run from it. You can't escape it." "But I don't understand," Emily said, her voice shaky but desperate. "What do I do now? How do I stop this?" Lily stepped closer, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of guilt and resolve. "You don't. You can't. But maybe you can find peace with it. Maybe you can make it right in your own way." Max nodded slowly, the weight of his words heavy in the air. "The truth isn't always something you can fix, Emily. Sometimes, you just have to learn to live with it." For a moment, Emily stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The world she had known, her life, had been turned upside down, shattered by a mystery that had started with a missing backpack and a journal. The forces she had uncovered were far bigger, far more dangerous, than she had ever realized. And yet, she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't the same person who had started this journey. She had fought back. She had survived. As the three of them stood there in the dark, the quiet of the night settling around them, Emily realized that no matter how much she had uncovered, the story wasn't over. Not really. The conspiracy might not have been defeated, but it had been exposed. And that was enough, for now. The mystery would never truly be solved, not all of it, but she had made her mark. The world would keep turning, and so would she. But as Emily walked away from the park, the weight of the night still heavy on her heart, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There were always more secrets, more lies, more people who would stop at nothing to bury the truth. And as much as she wanted to find peace, as much as she hoped for closure, deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something bigger, something darker. And that lingering question, who was behind all of this? Who had set everything in motion, still echoed in her mind as she disappeared into the night, leaving behind the only life she had ever known, knowing that no matter where she went, the shadows would always be waiting.